Welcome to Motivated to Lead podcast, helping you become a better leader. I'm your host, Mark Klingstein. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our podcast this week. My name is Mark Klingstein with SEMA Partners. Each week, we interview leaders and they share lessons learned from their careers. Our goal is to help you become a better leader. This week, we're happy to have join us Ellen Taaffe. Ellen is a clinical associate professor at the Kellogg School of Management, and she teaches personal leadership insights and is the director of Women's Leadership Program. She spent 25 years with the Fortune 500 companies, including holding the top brand management positions at PepsiCo, Royal Caribbean, and Whirlpool Corporation. She serves as a board director for 3 company boards, both public and private, and she also advises companies. And she's written a new book entitled "The Mirror Door: Break Through the Hidden Barrier That Locks Successful Women in Place." Looking forward to today's conversation with Ellen. Can you give us just a little bit of your career story, just a little bit of your background and how you've gotten to where you are today?
My main career background is I spent 25 years in corporate America. I started in sales and moved into brand management, primarily in consumer packaged goods. I worked for Quaker Oats and then PepsiCo for over 2 decades. I then joined Royal Caribbean, heading up a brand there, and then moved to the Whirlpool Corporation, where I led a portfolio of brands. And following that, I joined a company to lead it as the owners retired. And that was called Smith Dahmer. We did brand and product strategy. I happened to be their client at Whirlpool. So it was, a wonderful organization to join. I was there for 5 years. And then I joined, when I was there, I joined my first board. I joined 2 more in the decade since. And I ended up joining my alma mater, Kellogg School of Management, 7 years ago next month, where I head up women's leadership programming. I'm a clinical associate professor in the management and organizations department, and I teach a class called Personal Leadership Insights. So now I'm in this sort of portfolio lifestyle of teaching, and that has brought me into writing. So I'm just launching a book called "The Mirror Door: Break Through the Hidden Barrier That Locks Successful Women in Place." And it's just sort of been a labor of love, both teaching MBA students, working on boards and helping advance companies, and now getting my message out for young women.
Yeah.
Women of all ages, I should say.
Yeah. Well, we definitely want to talk about the book, and that's coming out October 10th. And so that's just around the corner when people are listening to this. So if you were able to go back and talk to a 22-year-old Ellen, what advice would you give her?
For me, I would say to myself, run your own race, figure out what you really like to do and what you're good at, and can get better at, and hopefully get paid for that too, and go after that. I spent a lot of my 20s in sales, which I liked, I didn't love. And then I found brand management and marketing and continued to find things that were really a great fit for me. So sort of figuring out what's important to you. And we spent a lot of time at work. So finding something that you could really get lost in time, spending your time focusing on.
Yeah, that's great. So your book is coming out. You said it's a labor of love. Talk a little bit about just kind of the message of the book and just some of the thought behind it, as far as kind of what was it that got you to write this book at this time?
Sure. So it was spurred on by the first orientation I was at Kellogg, where a keynote speaker shared her career story and opened it up for questions. And all the hands that shot up were all from the men in the class, and women didn't raise their hands. Now, what I know about them is they're brilliant. They've made the most of their 20s. And so something was up with that. And it reminded me of me in my own orientation, 25 years earlier at Kellogg. And it got me to sort of dig into this thing that happens that I now call the mirror door, where when we face opportunity as small as raising your hands or bigger as going for a big job, that we can hesitate and think that we're not ready or not worthy, or the reaction in the room could be so bad that we hold back. And the reality is when we open that door and move forward with uncertainty and imperfection, that's where all the learning is. That's how we grow our careers. So over time, I dug into research and really, figured out that so much of it comes from some of our conditioning in ways that made us successful, but can also sideline us later in our careers as well.
So do you think, and I think most leaders probably didn't feel like they were prepared for a leadership position prior to getting the tap on the shoulder to say, hey, we see some leadership qualities. And I heard you, I think it was on a TED Talk that you talked about the whole concept of rethinking our readiness. And yes. I think you used the term ready, set, go. Can you talk a little bit about that? And just, is that one of the principles in this book?
Yeah, it is. And it's basically, we are more ready than we realize. And this is particularly true of high achievers, likely the people that get the tap on the shoulder to become leaders. Someone sees something in us and we are more ready. People don't expect us to be perfect in the very first time we're leading people, but with the right coaching and with the efforts and with a lot of self-awareness, we can get there. So, we lose some of the spirit of childhood when we say ready, set, go. But the reality is that we are more ready, and we're going to learn so much by moving into that action. That's where all the learning is. And I don't just have students who are MBA students. We are also students as we move into new positions, and we have to adopt that kind of beginner mindset as well.
What are some of the things that you, looking back on your first leadership role, what do you wish you would have known earlier? It took you a while to learn.
I think how to ask better questions, how to motivate. My first leadership experience, I smiled because I was a district manager, and I think I was 26 or 27. And all the people that I managed were younger than me, living in a lot of small towns in Tennessee and Mississippi. Sure. And they didn't want to be there. They got moved there. And there were young people, all single. And so figuring out how to motivate them for the time that they were there, we were all moving through positions and getting promoted. And so I think tapping into people's goals and what they could learn in the moment of the roles that they were in that were likely going to only last for a year or two. Sure. But the questions that could help motivate them and tie them back to their goals and what really mattered to them.
So everybody, one time desires a mentor. Was that something that you purposely sought out people to be mentors, or how did you approach that, and what would you encourage new leaders to do?
Yeah, I feel like I was very fortunate to have a lot of mentors. I think we can find them in different places, and they don't always have to look like us. Sometimes I would say, boy, almost the first half of my career, I had and still do have mentors who are men who give me another perspective on things. I also sought out mentors that were peers when I joined a mentoring circle at Quaker Oats. And that was sort of amazing to do within my company, where we all could share our stories about how do we navigate the culture and are, seeking out getting promotions or getting things done, or how do you present to the senior leadership team. those kinds of shared stories are really important. And then I also joined a Mentium, a group where I sought out someone who was a working mom, and it was right before I was pregnant. Here I was in brand management, but I got someone who was an accounting partner who had twins, and had, negotiated her way to handle what was changing in her life too. So I think figuring out what do you want mentoring in, and where can you find that? And I think people are really willing to share their experiences, and you can take from it what could be relevant for you. But huge impact in my life.
Yeah. Well, talk about just some of the skill set that you think for somebody that's, again, they might be a first-time CEO, or they might be just in their first leadership management position. What are some of the skill sets that you think tend to be blind spots that people need to develop as they're in that kind of first stages as far as of leadership?
Yeah, I think one that we don't talk about a lot is listening. So listening and really understanding your people. One of the things that I have done when I've gone into, like when I joined Smith Dummer, I interviewed everyone that I would work with. So it was like 30 people. And I asked everyone 5 questions. And the 2 that were most impactful were, what do you hope I'll do? And what do you fear I'll do? Now, going in as a leader, you have more license to ask those kinds of questions, but it was really fascinating to get the answers. And those are more valuable than something on a performance objective, because it's really like what's going to move the business forward. Also, what will create followership, which is sort of another term. We talk about leadership. We don't really talk about followership, but how do you bring people along with you? And then what are they afraid of? And not everyone will answer that. I had one person who said, I fear that you're going to be a corporate monster. And I was shocked, because I feel like I'm so not a corporate monster. But the reality was, I was coming from 25 years in corporate America to a smaller company. Of course they saw that. So that was my own blind spot, to not understand the people. So finding ways to listen, to learn, and to be transparent. So it doesn't mean that I'm going to always do what everyone else wants, but when I make a decision on something, I'm going to share how I got there, and I would have shared what the feedback I got about it and why I went that way or went a different way too.
Yeah, those are 2 great questions. I think you dig to the deep concerns or expectations as far as of the team. A lot of times people move into a leadership position, they don't have the luxury of hiring their own team. They inherit, typically a team that's there, and could be that they're, peers that you're now leading your peers that you had in the previous position. What is the mindset that you, again, making that shift from, being a peer, moving into that and say now, and people are probably saying, I could have been the leader. I don't know why they picked that person, but talk a little bit about that. Have you experienced that yourself, or seen what people do successfully?
Yeah, I have. I had, many times people join a company in a cohort, and I had an experience earlier in my career where I managed someone who was my peer when we first started. And fortunately, he was a very gracious, wonderful guy. But we talked about it in our very first meeting that, that this was sort of the step that was taken. In the future, it could be the reverse. We didn't really know, but I think it's when you avoid it. So it's okay to say, I feel really awkward about saying this, but let's talk about the elephant in the room. Right. Especially early on, when the cohort sort of watches who gets promoted, and you're more aware of that early on. It kind of all disappears later. But early on, it's just important to acknowledge that. And I think when you didn't pick your team, The great thing is they're people who know the business or that department, and they can help you. So really valuing who they are, what they want, and how they can contribute can really help the team and you succeed.
So a lot of new CEOs or new leaders have the desire to be on a board, and you've been in board seats. What are some things that you think are important, and has that been a valuable experience for you, first off? And secondly, how did you get on a board, and what would you say to leaders that are desiring that experience?
Yeah, I love board service. I've now been doing it for 12 years. I'm on 3 boards, and I have different leadership positions within them. And I think that the important things are understanding business, and in particular having financial experience. I don't know that I'd be on it if I had not had years of P&L responsibility as well. Historically, boards were CEOs or CFOs, and that's really changed, I'd say, in the last decade or so. When I joined, it was sort of a newer thing to have someone from brand management. I think that's more common now, as they're considered more growth drivers or the growth strategy a lot of times. But so the functional areas have really changed. We have supply chain, cybersecurity, all different kinds of things too. And I think that having experience that helps you to lead businesses and lead others can help you to get there. It's important to let others know that you want to be on a board, because much of it happens through networking. It's important to also connect with the recruiters, who usually also have a board governance practice within recruiting firms. And I think that look at other people who are kind of in your path, who are sitting on boards, and look at their experiences. So for public company boards, the big secret is look at their annual proxy, which identifies generally the skills that boards are looking at, how they brought on new members, and then for each board director, it talks about their experiences. So that way you can kind of see what sort of different experiences they had, or do have something like that would make you board ready. There's all kinds of different training programs that you could, from National Association to Corporate Directors or Kellogg or other universities and other programs can help you to know what you're getting into, because it's a great thing. It also comes with some risks too, because you're making decisions like the future CEO and, strategic plans, acquisitions, and things like that. But it's a great thing to think about in your career, and to add to, in particular, over the long term as well.
Right. So every leader should be a learner
Yes.
and continue to grow. Are there any books that you recommend to your students or to other leaders that you think would be helpful?
Yeah, I give them a long list, so I'll just name a few. One, True North by Bill George is one, and it's very similar. Some of the concepts are very similar to my class that I teach. I would also say The Right and the Wrong Stuff, How Brilliant Careers Are Made and Unmade by Carter Cast is a great one. And in particular for women, How Women Rise by Sally Helgeson. And of course, for anyone who leads other people, The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay Stanier is like one of my favorites. It's an easy read. And the questions we ask of people are so important for that. But I could go on as well.
Yeah.
Atomic Habits, constant #1 bestseller, it seems like.
You got to put the mirrored door on that list too. So
absolutely. Absolutely. I should have said that first.
So outside of work, what do you do to recharge?
If you'd asked me that a couple of years ago, it would have been a different answer. But my husband and I have relocated and downsized and downtowned from the suburbs of Chicago to Chicago. And we are just loving getting back in touch with the city. So whether that is restaurants or we have tickets to theater and the symphony, which I'm really learning about the symphony. My husband volunteers at the Field Museum. And, a great night to us is a picnic and an outdoor concert in one of the many parks, and a constant dog walking our golden retriever, I would say, too.
What parting advice would you give to a new or up and coming leader?
I would say know yourself. Like know your strengths, what made you who you are, know your impact on people, know what triggers you, and as far as that impact on people, getting really good at getting feedback. Feedback is all too vague, and the more that you can help people, give them permission and ask really specific questions, help you understand where you are. I say in the book, and I tell my students, know the book on you, in the sense of being aware what's working for you and what's getting where do you get in your own way so that you can work on that.
Yeah. Great advice. And again, how would somebody learn more about your work and your new book that's coming out?
Yeah. So it's available for pre-order now and comes out October 10th, The Mirrored Door. And my website is ellentaaffe.com. Taaffe is TAAFFE.com. /book. You can learn more about the book, /10 tips. I have 10 tips of things I wish I learned earlier in my career. That's available there too, as well as other articles and things that I have written as well.
Great. Well, Ellen, we're looking forward to getting a copy of your book and definitely wish you continued success in all you're doing, and appreciate you taking time to share some of your wisdom and insights.
Great. Thank you so much, Mark. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you for listening to the Motivated to Lead podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes. You can also see a video version of this interview at motivatedtolead.com. This podcast is brought to you by SEMA Partners, helping you find your next great leader.